Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back to the final episode of my show Muslim Matters. I'm Abubakr Nanabawa. As always, if you want to text, please feel free to message on 077 488 55055. That's 077 488 55055. For the last 3 weeks, I have hopefully entertained you with my own voice. But alhamdulillah, today I'm really happy to have my first guest of the series. And I really wanted to use this time to explore with Yahya.
All right, first guest and last episode.
Yes, first guest and last episode.
This is an honor.
Yes, we had to keep it balanced and fair. Other available guests were maybe not too friendly. For radio regulations. Right. That's a discussion for another day. So Yahya, I mean, do you want to quickly just introduce yourself, who you are, what you do?
Well, assalamu alaikum everyone. I've been on radio before, so some of you might have heard me on Z Show. But my name is Yahye Abdi. I do a lot of community work, specifically in St. Matthew's in the Somali community. But now I do stuff regionally and nationally with Citizens UK, and particularly focusing on getting young people more involved in politics, and more locally, regionally, I work on reducing violence through building stronger communities. Yeah,
so the last few weeks I've kind of been discussing this politics at a national level, but most importantly politics at a local level. But before we get into the local stuff and how I think people should be working to tangibly make a change, a lot of the work you do with Citizens UK, I want us to reflect back to October 2023 and the moment, probably November, in November 11th, I believe was the date, when Jonathan Ashworth, Jess Phillips and other members of the Labour shadow cabinet at the time refused to vote for a ceasefire, even though they were in heavily Muslim constituency. Do you want to just take me back to what you were feeling at that moment and the impact that it had on yourself as a young Muslim in the UK?
Well, the issues that were happening in the Middle East have been going on for a very long time, right? But after October, the world didn't start in October, but after October, the way that the war was happening in specifically Palestine was completely shocking, and seeing the MPs clearly, the power of the blatant injustice that was in our political system just became visible to the whole world. And a lot of people, including myself, thought if they don't represent our local concerns, then what else are they not representing us for? This is the most blatant, obvious thing that a lot of constituents want to happen, but they voted against the interest of the local population. And this has been, and you can talk about inequality increasing and all these other issues around housing and youth violence, which I deal with. But that particular thing was just so blatantly constituents wanting one thing, and the person at top with the chair, with the kursi, doesn't want that same thing, so they vote the other way.
Yeah. So I remember that was the moment, obviously, that me and a few others worked together to establish the Muslim Vote project. And I must say, even as someone who was, involved in talking to people all over the country, Leicester was perhaps the biggest surprise to me of them all. I remember looking at the data, and I was joking with someone the other day, remembering a conversation where I said, if you cut the majority down to 10,000 in Leicester, that will be a miracle in and of itself. Yeah. But, Leicester being the city of miracles, has produced 2 miracles in the last 10 years or so.
Yeah.
But what do you think about Leicester made it stand out and made it the place where a person who was meant to be a senior member of the cabinet, an official spokesperson of the government, who was on Sky News every day during the election cycle, what was it about Leicester that meant that there was such a huge upset?
I mean, in Leicester, Leicester has a long history of diversity. Is arguably one of the most diverse cities in the whole of Europe. You could even say maybe the whole world. So we've had loads of different people working, having solidarity over different issues for a very long time. And when that, I mean, we saw it happen during the Iraq War as well, where the local MP was ousted by a Lib Dem. But more recently, to have a completely independent, no party political support, just one guy that people thought, okay, he is a local guy. And he came and knocked those people that told me, well, this guy knocked on my door and I never had anyone else knocked on the door. Like, that's what some canvassers were saying that I was speaking to. I mean, just the neglect of the local people and the feeling that they haven't been heard for so long. But the thing is, Leicester is a city of incredible unity. It wasn't. I mean, Palestine wasn't a Muslim issue. It's not only Muslims that care about Palestine, and it's anyone you speak to, they will say, okay, what's happening there? No, white, black, green, blue, anything. They will all say the same thing. But what I think was different about Leicester specifically was that the historical diversity and solidarity between different groups that live side by side in the same areas.
Yeah, because often, I've heard this accusation many times that the Muslim vote was a sectarian project, and I really must emphasize that the Muslim vote was not involved in Shockat's campaign. It was a deeply local campaign, which is obviously why I'm talking to Yahye here today. So tell me your experience of talking to ordinary people on the street. Would you concur with this kind of messaging that these candidates who won nationally, whether it be in Birmingham or Blackburn or in London, were won by sectarian means, or was it a broader coalition of disinfected voters?
It's definitely a broader coalition, and there's an interesting thing happening in the country right now, right? I mean, we've seen living standards being eroded, especially since the 80s. Inequality has been growing. More and more people. It's got to the point where people's children are going to be worse off than they are, and that's never happened. That's never happened in British recorded history before. It was always assumed that your children will be better off than you are. It's happening in other places. Like, look at China. Every generation is getting progressively more wealthy. But here in the West, and it's not just the UK, it's all Western countries, that's what's happening. And there is a real big rejection of the power system and the system that we have right now. Now, that expresses itself in different ways in different areas. People are looking for, people know that something is wrong, but they can't, because people have been so disenfranchised through the media. Like, the thing is, if you read the media, if you don't read the media, you're uninformed. But if you read the media, you're misinformed. So it creates this cesspool of just people that are just angry. They're just angry with the system. They know that these politicians don't care about them. The Gaza ceasefire vote was like one blatant, obvious thing that people could point to and be like, hold on a second, that was not what we wanted. What's going on here? So it really pinpointed it. And there are other parts of the country, obviously reform are growing right now. And as it's kind of funny, as inequality, well, I say it's funny, it's actually kind of very worrying. As inequality grows, as poverty grows, people are looking for people to blame. And to be honest, it is like the global elite that are controlling it. And they are funding the narrative that it is immigrants, because there are two narratives that are currently being put forward that for the reason that things are getting worse. One of them is the immigrants, and one of them is the global elite. So the global elite, the only thing that can keep people off of them is saying that it's the immigrants. But there's a lot of people that don't agree it's the immigrants, because they know it's not the immigrants. They see them working, they see them in the NHS treating them, they see them in all these different walks of life. So for those people, they're looking for another alternative. And that alternative has been independent in many different regions. Some people chose Green Party or SNP or Plaid Cymru or basically anything that's not the uni party that people see, which is the red and blue.
Yeah, let's reflect on this kind of uni party narrative. I think it's been ever strengthened in the last year or so. One of the first things that kind of shocked me was not the Labour Party actually voting against removal of two-child caps on certain benefits around children. Any MP that kind of went against Keir Starmer's orders and whip, and really shockingly, Keir Starmer has restored the whip to all MPs apart from the 2 Muslim women, which is
oh really?
Yeah, well, which is another story for another day. Especially Absana Begum, who has been treated awfully by the Labour Party. But again, we can discuss that another time. But do you think people are becoming more and more aware of this uni-party narrative? And also, how much is that contributing to the dramatic rise in Reform, who are now consistently polling in first place? I think 2 of the last 5 polls, they've been polling above Labour.
Yeah. I mean, the Tories, they've been on this tirade of austerity, which has completely exacerbated the problems that we had in society. What happens when you take the money that people in the lowest 50, 60, 70% and funnel it to the top 1%? The people will get poorer. The people living standard will get worse. And that's been well documented. A lot of people know that these things don't work. And what people thought would happen, like even like my mum, my aunties and these kind of people, they think, oh, you know what, like Labour, they invest in like the working class, they invest in people at the bottom. That's the narrative. They're like, oh, okay, they bring the benefits, they bring the schools, the NHS and all that kind of stuff. But they're still doing the thing where when they're looking for money, they always look at who are the most poor and needy in society, and let's take away money from them, instead of looking to reverse what was happening over the past 50 years.
Just a quick message. Reform will win lots of seats at the upcoming local elections.
So is that a text message that's come in?
Yeah, it seems so.
And you know what? You're probably right. Reform will definitely, with the way things are going, Reform will win a lot of seats in the local elections.
And I think it's a real important message to listeners is we should not get into the habit of blaming Reform voters and trying to separate ourselves from Reform voters. We should use amount of empathy. Of course, there will be a certain amount of Reform voters who are racist and who can't be reached to. But a significant percentage of them will just be, as Yahye has described, disenfranchised, looking for someone to explain why their life has got worse.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, the message that mainstream media has allowed to be pumped out for all these years is the message of Nigel Farage and I'm not going to call them the far right, but the populist right, who encourage people to look at immigrants instead of looking at the wealthiest in society, who have become a lot wealthier especially since COVID. We've seen increasing deepening of that divide.
Since COVID, the government gave out over £1 trillion, is it, that they've given out? So that is, Gary Stevenson, if anyone hasn't heard him, he always says the government gave out £1 trillion. That's 20,000 for every person in the country. Do you have that 20,000? Do I have that 20,000?
We wish.
Listener, do you have that 20,000? They haven't asked, when they're giving away that money, nobody asks where will that money end up? Where's that money going to end up? And it's ended up with the very top, at the top 1%. So it doesn't surprise you when inequality and poverty grows for everyone else who doesn't have that money. It's not a surprise. And no one asked that question at that time. They just wrote the checks. And, it was the Conservatives in power at the time with Rishi Sunak, who's richer than the king himself. So nobody asked. And living standards have gotten worse. And the policies that are getting in place now are not going to improve living standards.
Yeah, and it's also a really interesting reflection that I was watching Gary Stevenson yesterday.
Yeah.
Was about the Conservative government were the ones who led Brexit, who pushed this kind of anti-immigrant message. But as soon as they left the EU, immigration did not decrease; it tripled.
Yeah.
Overnight.
Yeah. Oh, we have a text. Left-wing MP John McDonnell also hasn't been given the whip back.
Okay, interesting. Okay. Obviously, former Shadow Chancellor John McDonnell.
Yeah, what they are doing is turning the working class against each other. Exactly. 100%. Whoever that texter is. Like, they're turning the working class against each other. And this is something that I've criticised of the, like, liberal left, or, like, the Democrat style or Labour Party style so-called people that are saying they're for working class people. They don't recognise that privileges, a lot of privileges that are out there, don't extend through class.
Yeah.
So a lot of working, like, there's a lot of privileged people out there, but if you are from a poor family, starting from nothing, as a white British family, you will be struggling just as much. So when people tell you that, oh, you have privilege as a white person, then, like, there was this quote where, like, Hillary Clinton, I think, she said that taxing the wealthy is not going to get rid of racism, and it's not going to get rid of racism and misogyny. And it's like, okay, yeah, it's not going to get rid of racism and misogyny, but making people better off will stop. A lot of people that are racist, there's studies that show this, they're angry first and then they're looking for output. So if people don't get angry in the first place, then they're much less likely to be racist or misogynistic or any of those things.
Yeah, and how do you see this Labour government going? I remember, and I mean, this is an open secret, I was a former member of the Labour Party during the Corbyn era. And having talked to people who have remained maybe members of the Labour Party, who are maybe more on the left, they keep telling themselves this story that once Starmer gets into government, he's going to be more left wing. Now, it hasn't been proven to be true so far, but do you think it will prove to be true by the time we get to the next general election in around 2029, or do you think he's going to continue down this path of cutting spending on disabilities, on the most elderly in our society, or do you think he's just trying to get as he says, keep to the rules so that grow the economy and spend on ordinary people?
Well, look, I'll look at his track record, right? So he's been in power, like a few months now, 8 months or something.
Yes, around 8 months.
So what has he done so far? He has taken money away from children. He has basically taxed children by cutting their spending. Children, by the way, if you look at the country, children are the most likely to be in poverty out of everyone. And so those people, he's cutting their money. Disabled people that are literally too disabled to, like, do work or function or do some certain things, are literally unable to do things, cutting their money. That's what he's done so far. So in order to, what he needs to do is somehow figure out how to redistribute the assets in this country, because this country is not very good at producing new assets. It's not very good at that. The most common company in the UK is a buy-to-let company, which is renting out an existing asset. It's not building new houses, it's not doing anything else. That's when you talk to youngsters, which I do all the time, they think about, and young entrepreneurs talk about flipping houses. They're like, oh yeah, we're going to get into a buy-to-let or a rent-to-rent business or this kind of stuff. This is the aspirations that many of the people have, and when they have money, they invest into that stuff instead of other businesses, which will make this a more diversified, thriving economy. So he needs to fix the asset issue in the UK, and he's not doing that. And because he's not doing that, and he's not trying to reverse anything that the Tories did, things are gonna get worse over the next 5 years. Things are gonna get worse. So people should prepare themselves, because the way things are going, things are gonna get worse. And what's going to happen is people are going to look for different people to go to. They're going to look at the ideas on the table. They're going to be looking at a lot of people are going to look at reform because Muslims are only 6% of the country.
Yep, 6.
So a lot of people don't even know Muslims, or a lot of the part of the country is just you wouldn't see any person of color. So if you've never seen or interacted, and you see the news, which has 21 negative news stories about a Muslim for every neutral, that not even positive, neutral portrayal of a Muslim, what does that do to the way you see Muslims in general? So things are absolutely going to get worse. And what I see happening is by the next election, we see reform already taking power or in the polls. If there was an election today, Nigel Farage would probably be president. I think it's a very, very good possibility that Nigel Farage will be president. I mean, not president, prime minister. I've been watching too much American news with Donald Trump. But Nigel Farage becoming prime minister. And Nigel Farage is funded by, he saw Elon Musk saying that he's going to give 100 million to Nigel Farage, which is a ridiculous amount of money for UK politics.
Yeah, I've never heard that money.
Yeah,
in UK politics, you can only spend about £20,000 on a seat during election year. For non-party organisers, you're allowed to spend £700 on third-party campaigning, which actually probably the best thing about UK democracy.
Mm-hmm.
You would never have an independent win in America. I mean, you have Bernie Sanders, but the Democrats kind of just stand down for him in Vermont. But apart from that, you aren't getting an independent winning in America. And the UK needs to make sure it sticks to this tradition of strong electoral laws. But yeah, I mean, so the track record is perhaps not one to be impressed with. But if we look into the future, into our magic glass, in 4 years, because everyone seems to keep telling me, I talk to loads of people across the country, and there's this narrative. This is a flash in the pan. There was a Gaza moment, and these 4 independents plus Corbyn won, and it's never going to happen again. Do you think it's possible for there to be, whether it's a new party who is maybe to the left, who talks about more class consciousness and emphasizes the need for more ethical foreign policy, or do you see them having more seats at the next election, or do you see essentially these 4 candidates retreating back into their everyday lives at the end of these terms?
Yeah, and Gaza was a rallying cry. It really, the way it made it very blatant for me, and I'm someone who pays attention more than most people, but everyone saw how blatant the complete disregard for local people were. There's this chart in America which charts how likely a policy is to be implemented and how many people want it, and you expect it to correlate. The more people that want something, the more likely it is to be implemented. But it's just a straight line. It has no correlation at all. But there's another chart which shows the top 1% of people and how much they want it to be implemented and how likely it is. And the correlation is there. So democracy right now, in the West at least, or in the UK and America, there's democracy but for the rich. And there's Bernie Sanders and AOC right now going across America doing their oligarchy tour of America. And you see this happening with Elon Musk and him talking about, and him supporting people like Tommy Robinson of all people, and doing Nazi salutes and all these random things. So these things are growing. And the thing that I see, right, is these issues are not going to go away. So there is the thing that makes you open your eyes, and then people have to see what's going on, and people are going to notice that things are getting worse. And I think the only way I have a hope that people will have their eyes open to what's actually happening and what the real issues to our problems are. But the thing is, not everyone knows. People have been so disenfranchised. A lot of people, how many people do you know that say, I don't pay attention to politics? I want to stay out of it. I don't want to do this. I don't want to do that. and right now it's getting like almost dangerous to not do that. Like before, like if your life was getting better, then you can chillax and you don't need to do anything. But if your living standards are getting worse, then you need to pay attention. So I think it depends. If people talk to each other, tell everyone you know what. Oh, we have a text message in. But yeah, if they tell everyone they know what's actually happening in society, then when the idea becomes too big, because it's not going to get funding from like the oligarchs or the billionaires, they're not going to fund this because this means worse things for them. But they will fund the only thing which is against what they're saying, which is literally the immigrants are the problem. It's not us, it's the immigrants.
Yeah, and remember the oligarchs would always say that immigrants are the problem and then ask privately for an increase in immigration.
Yeah.
In a previous job of mine, I used to work at a company which would work with major businesses in asking them what they wanted from the government. They always used to talk to me about more skilled immigrants, saying Britain does not have enough skilled individuals. And in my head, I used to sit there thinking, you have multi-billion pound profits a year. You can put a bit of that in reskilling the British population. Like, it's not, it should 100%. Be part of your obligation.
The Tories were talking about heavy on immigration, but immigration was like record levels when they were in power. There's this whole, and I honestly believe there's a war on young people and children because they don't want to give money. They want to take money from everywhere, including children, which is why it's harder to have kids. There's less kids in every family now. I think they want to reach a point where there are no children in this country at all, and the only new people in this country are immigrants that have come here and learned from somewhere else. But that, well, I should hold the text in.
Yeah, with what Labour are doing, they won't win a majority of seats at the next election. They'll have to ask the Liberal Democrats to be part of the government. Well, there's another part to the text, but let's deal with that first. I mean, do you agree? Is the real question. Let's say there was an election in 6 months. Democrats. Do you think Labour would stand a chance of getting an absolute majority?
You know, Labour's best chance is the Tories and Reform fighting it out, which is basically how they won this election. Yeah. That is their best chance. And, you know, if Reform people are gonna, if the right wing get savvy enough, they will stand down in different seats and become some sort of coalition between. If there's a coalition between the Tories and Reform, then I reckon Labour is finished. But I mean, if there is a war between them and they just get around the same amount of seats as Reform or it happened in, was it France?
Yeah, the Progressive Coalition.
There's a Progressive Coalition, so that is a possibility.
But I must say that takes an incredible amount of, and someone who sat with a lot of people on the left in the last few years and the last few months in particularly, it requires a level of discipline that maybe we don't see currently in this country, and understanding the moment. Because obviously that coalition in France contained everything from the centre left, which would be like, okay, a bit further to the left than current Labour, to literal communists. I don't know. I mean, obviously we don't have any literal communists in this country, well, who have a potential of winning. The last comment that the messenger sent was about Gary Stevenson standing as a independent. Now, do you want to quickly just explain who he is for any listeners who might not know?
So Gary Stevenson, he was a trader at Citibank, had a pretty good book which I picked up like a few weeks ago. He was the top trader in the world at Citibank, and the way he made his money and how he became the top trader was betting that the economy will get worse. He bet every time that the economy will get worse for working class people. And surprise, surprise, by the end, he realized, okay, it's never going to get better. I'm just going to keep making money. And then he became the top trader in the world at Citibank, a big American international bank. So then he left Citibank and he was AWOL for a while. And then he just came out and started making videos talking about how he's made his money and talking to regular everyday people about, he bets money that the economy is going to collapse, and he keeps winning, and now he's just warning everyone.
Yeah. When we say bet that the economy is going to collapse, essentially he makes trades on the premise that inequality is going to get worse. So, for example, he invests a lot of money in gold because as currencies devalue and inequality gets worse, the price of gold increases.
Yeah, it's not like a casino.
Yeah, it's not a casino. There's not a bookies. He's not going back to Betsy's 365 and betting there.
Yeah, it's like a trader who's like, okay, I think gold is going to go more expensive and people are going to want gold more, so I'm going to buy some gold, and that's the type of bet.
Yeah. And one of the big things he used to bet on was that interest rates wouldn't go up, and they didn't go up for about 10 years because people had no spending power, so the government needed people to spend and essentially not save. Would I like to see him stand as an independent? Well, my opinion is that everyone should use their unique skill for, and actually we should actually get onto this. They should use their unique skills to serve the community and a movement with those skills. So could Gary Stevens make a good MP? Perhaps, but is he best utilized as a communicator?
Yeah,
I would argue so.
Like, yeah, I 100% agree with you. Like Gary Stevenson, I think he is like the best at just pointing people to, this is the problem, this is the true problem. That is what he's really good at. He's really good at going on interviews. He was on like Piers Morgan debating with some idiot that was
Dave Rubin, I believe.
Yeah, Dave Rubin, and he's on different shows talking to people, and you hear these eloquent economists talking about the state of the economy and the real way that interest rates and people being, but he goes straight to the point and talks in a straightforward way that people understand. And that is what you need. Like, economists have been, well, I mean, he talks about this, people getting it wrong for many years. But that's where he's best implemented. When it comes to policy, he's not so good at making policy and like saying different policies. And I don't expect him to. That's not his wheelhouse. And like debating in the House of Parliament, is that what I would rather have him doing? Like going to Parliament every day instead of making his being a communicator, bringing out the message, which he's got like 1 million subscribers on YouTube now. I mean, I think that's where he's probably best. Yeah, I mean, you have to work to your strengths.
Yeah, and he's had exponential levels of growth. And perhaps in my lifetime, apart from the Labour movement, he's the only person who has broken through as a economist to this level. I think Grace Blakely had a period, and she's incredibly smart, and I would recommend people read her books, but she hasn't had that cut through that Gary Stevens has with his straightforward communication matter. Okay, we kind of talked about the national picture, but we have 10 minutes left, and the reason, one of the big reasons I wanted to call Yahye on today was because of your incredible work doing community organising. Because of course, look, we want systemic government level change in the long term, but in the short term, how do we as ordinary people, as things are getting worse, how do we make sure that our communities are protected from the worst ends of those consequences? How do we identify those problems, and how do we make a change? So kind of just quickly take me through what you like kind of understand community organising to mean, and how you think people can go about it within their own families and their own communities.
So community organising is, the way I see it is the rebuilding of a community or a society, right? We've had the communities have been completely destroyed for many years in this country, where everyone stays in their own house. They don't talk to they don't even know who their neighbours are. They don't know who different people in the community. People are just locked into their phones, doom scrolling all day. So society has been pulled apart, and people have been put into silos where they are. And the thing is, if you're on your own, whenever you have a problem, you'll be begging. You'll be begging, and you won't be powerful enough to make any change. But when you have a community, whatever community it is, like you can identify as an ethnic community, a neighborhood community, a community of people that play basketball. It could be any sort of self-defined community. But building a community in order to have actual power and say over the environment around you. So that's what I see as community organizing.
Okay, and so let's say someone's got a community with them. Let's say they play five-a-side every week with their friends, which is quite a common thing young men do. And let's say, okay, they see in their community that maybe the streets are getting more and more dirty. That was an old job of mine as well, making sure the streets of my local area, which was quite deprived, were clean. How can they go about from identifying an issue to perhaps looking to tackle and solve that issue with the people around them?
Well, we have like a 5-step program which I could go into, but I think it'll be better if I just tell you like an example of some people doing this.
Absolutely.
So I'll give you an example. So there's these kids, and there was this. So one of the men who taught me about community organizing, his name was Daniel from Citizens UK. So he's a Jewish man in London, a fantastic, brilliant guy. But there was this school, right, in London, and there were these year 5s. And those year 5s we wanted to teach the kids community organizing. And the first step of community organizing is listening. You have one mouth and 2 ears. So listen to the people around you. So he listened to the kids. He asked them, what makes you angry? And what makes you angry is very important, because what you're annoyed about, those things are not things that will get you to act. But what makes you angry is something that will make you act upon it. So he asked these kids, what makes you angry? And they were talking about different things and that kind of stuff. And then one of them said, I go to this school nearby, and the playground over there has 3 swings and we have only 2 swings. That's not fair. And then the other kids heard that and they said, oh, what? They've got 3 swings and we have only 2 swings? That is not fair. How is this possible? This is a crime against our community, the year 5 community. So then the next step is asking, what can we do about it? So then they started talking to the people, like the adults in the room, and they did a bit of a power analysis. So power analysis is looking at all the different people that have the power to make the change that you want. So if you're looking at a swing, you're going to look at, well, it's going to be the council that will have that. So they said, okay, the council, who do I go in the council? We have a local councillor. And they said, okay, we're going to go to our councillor. That's what the kids said. And then then they asked, okay, now what are we going to do with the councillor? It's like, okay, we're going to like draw big pictures, we're going to protest, and we're going to go to his office and like call him and call a meeting and say that we really want another swing. So then the council was invited to the school and to the playground, and he saw all these kids saying, we want another swing, we want another swing. And then he was like, oh, what are these year 5s doing? And they were saying, there was a newspaper came out, they were like covering it because it's an interesting and funny story. And the councillor was there with all these cameras and media, and like these kids very angry about not having another swing. And then guess what happened? They got their swing. They got their swing. And now that's a small issue, but those kids will never forget that, okay, they saw something that they didn't like in their local area, and then they came together and made a plan to change it, and they actually did it. And if a bunch of year 5s can do it, then what are me, like as like 20-year-olds, 30-year-olds, like as grown men in the community, grown women in the community, teenagers, if you are older than year 5, then you'll be able to do this. Yeah. It's talking to the people around you, asking them, having one-to-ones with them, saying what makes you angry, and actually genuinely talking about local issues. Because a lot of issues, there's public and private, right? I talk about this sometimes. A lot of people keep their issues private and they don't tell anyone. But the thing is, probably there's 10, 20, 30, 40, maybe 1,000, maybe 100,000 people that have the exact same issue. And just like when that kid who mentioned that the other playground has 3 swings and we have 2 swings, the kids didn't know that because they probably didn't go to that other swing. But they got angry because they found out about something and were willing to ride or die for this issue for them. So yeah, just talk about what makes you angry. Build those trusting relationships with everyone around you, no matter who it is. and talk about like the real issues, because as I said, the media will, if you don't read the media, you're uninformed. If you read the media, you're misinformed, and the only way you can get informed is by talking to real people.
Yeah, it's probably one of the best lessons I ever learned when I started hearing about community organizing was lead with relationships.
Yeah.
People aren't left wing, right wing, liberal, conservative. This is like a misnomer. What do I expect from tomorrow's spring budget? More austerity. Well, let's not say austerity because they'll spin it and say it's technically not austerity. But they'll have obviously deep cuts in PIP, etc. Hopefully we'll see a decent amount of investment into the NHS, which is the one area the Labour government actually have been quite good, cutting NHS England, which is just useless bureaucracy. And they invested a significant amount of money last year. They've cut down waiting times, ended the strikes, etc. But we'll wait and see. The budgets normally get pre-leaked. So if you go to the Financial Times, which is actually a paper I would recommend everyone does read, Financial Times. It's my favourite paper because it's incredibly unbiased. Obviously, it's very high-level analysis, but it will increase your intelligence. But like I was saying, lead with relations, because people aren't left-wing, right-wing, liberal. I remember in 2016 reading about these voters who went from Bernie Sanders to Donald Trump, and they were in like the tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands.
Yeah.
Of Bernie voters who went to Donald Trump, and why? Because they were just like, the system's not working for me. This guy is trying to change the system. Oh, okay, yeah. They screwed the system against him. Oh, I'm going to go to the other side who says the system isn't working.
Yeah.
And so lead with relationships, big positive change on people's lives. The last question I want to ask you is, I've been going around the country now for the last year, talking to as many as people as I can, maybe now in the thousands, probably not in but more than 1,000 people in the last year I probably had conversations with about their challenges as ordinary Muslims, as ordinary working class people in this country. And I wanted to kind of ask you, which is this sense of hopelessness. Mm-hmm. What would you say to the people that feel hopeless and powerless, and keep on saying, look, we can't make any change? But as you showed, those kids did make a change. So what message would you give to them, and do you think that change is possible?
Change is 100% possible, and people that do feel hopeless, just go out and see the change that's happening. There's change happening all the time. There's people doing positive things. And like a lot of people, they might not doing like political activism, but I see like organizing. They might organize like a little meeting for like people. That's organizing. If they like start a food bank, that's organizing. If they start a community garden, that's organizing. If you put people together, if it's sad that today like meeting in person is a radical act, and a lot of people don't do that anymore. So the hope is still there, and the hope is all around you. And there has been change, and bigger things has happened. There's been bigger changes that have been happened with not that much effort. So yeah, there is a lot of hope. So anyone that says there is no hope and is being cynical, that say I don't vote, I think they're just blind to what's happening. Because there is a lot of good things happening.
Yeah, I think I'm going to finish with this kind of last idea, which is, the oligarchs and the billionaire class in particular, they rely on your hopelessness, because they know there are only a few, right? Yeah. There's maybe a few thousand billionaires on planet Earth, about 100, like around 200 odd in the UK. They want you to not know what's happening, because then they know they don't have to pick a fight. But if we can, start rebuilding community, start working with our neighbors, with our friends, with our colleagues, and rebuild that sense of community, then we can work together to make a real difference, and we can effectively, change the world. And I know that sounds like a very utopian idea for many people, but remember, the first step is literally the first step, right? You got to crawl before you can walk, and you got to walk before you can run.
People have been brainwashed into thinking they're hopeless, and that's what the billionaires want. Exactly. So that's my final message to you guys, which is build community, remember you have hope, and let's build towards a better world, not better work. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.